All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. This clock says it's time to begin, so it's good to see all of you here tonight. Glad that you could all be here. We'll be in chapter 34, uh, picking up in verse 10 here in just a moment when we pick up with our new material. Just kind of rehash what we said last class, bring us up to speed, remind us where we're at. Moses, children of Israel, this whole deal with making a covenant with the Lord, they did it, and then they broke it immediately, and they're kind of in this situation where, um, they're out of a covenant with the Lord. The Lord is not with them at this point, and they had the situation where He said, "Well, I'll send my angel with you, but I'm not going to go with you because I'm still mad with you." Moses, we saw last lesson how he approaches God, and he asks him. He says, "Well, what's the plan? What's the plan now? Let me know, please. Let me know." And Moses pleads with the Lord, um, for them to not leave and to not continue on, if your presence does not go with us. So we had Moses approaching God about that, and we had the deal where Moses asked the Lord to he wanted to see him there, and we had the deal where the Lord says, you can't see me, but He did allow him to see his back, whatever in whatever way that meant. But then in 34, the chapter we're in now, um, the Lord tells Moses, "Go cut you two more tablets of stone," and that's an exciting command for Moses to do, because what is that indicative of? It seems like he's willing to start over, take a couple steps back, and let's try this again. And that's what Moses um, has been pleading with him about. So the Lord gave Moses in the first few verses of chapter 34 the command to cut those tablets and get ready to come back up to Mount Sinai. And He gives him some of the commands about keep everything away from the mountain there. And we read that Moses did that, and he went up, and it said the Lord descended in the cloud there on the mountain as he had before. And we have description of the Lord here, that's proclaimed, some qualities about Him: merciful, gracious, long suffering, abounding in goodness and truth, keeping mercy, forgiving iniquity, but holding the guilty accountable. Um, so we have that description. So that's where we ended up. It said Moses bowed down there on this occasion. You can imagine how happy he is, how thankful he is that the Lord's willing to forgive them on this occasion for the wrong. So that gets us up to about where we left off last time. Do we have any comments or thing anybody wants to say before we kind of enter into the new material? Okay. So we'll begin in verse 10 here. And the first few, we'll kind of look at some items of this covenant. So they're going to be reminded again. All right, let's go back over what this covenant includes here. Before we make this again, let's be clear on what I expect. And in verse 10, it says, "And He said, Behold, I make a covenant before all your people. I will do marvels such as you have not seen, such as have not been done, in all the earth, nor in any nation. And all the people among you, uh, and all the people among whom you are, shall see the works of the Lord. For it is an awesome thing that I will do with you. Observe what I command you this day. Behold, I am driving out from before you the Amorite, Canaanite, Hittite, Perizzite, Hivite, Jebusite. Take heed to yourself, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land where you are going, lest it be a snare in your midst. But you shall destroy their altars, break their sacred pillars, cut down their wooden images. For you shall worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they play the harlot with their God, and play the harlot with their gods, and make sacrifices to their gods. And one of them invites you, and you eat of his sacrifice, and you take of his daughters, for your sons, and his daughters play the harlot with their gods, and make your sons play the harlot with their gods. You shall make no molten gods for yourself. So I'll stop right there for a second before we go into some of these other points of the covenant. And the very first thing that he addresses is the fact that they're fixing to go into this land, and he's going to help them go in and take this land. But the fact that they need to not mix, they need to drive out and stay separate from the people of this land. And we're going to see that they're not going to do as well at that part of this covenant in the future. But the Lord is stressing to them here that this is going to be a very important part of staying faithful to Him. And He stresses, the fact that they're going to be coming into a land. That's part of the sweetness of this, is they're coming into a land that's already furnished, right? There's already going to be houses and farms, and everything's going to be set up. All they got to do is drive the people out and just move in and take over. They're not starting from scratch on this stuff. But one thing that's going to be there are these people and all of their altars. Immediately you're going to go in, and there's going to be all of these pagan altars and pagan practices in place that are going to be there. And he stresses to them the fact that it's going to be real important when you get there to get rid of the people and all that kind of stuff immediately. Not mixing with them, not letting your family, your sons, mix with their daughters, and taking on the ways and the customs that they're going to have. So I think I wanted to break it up in that way because I think it's important that he stressed that. He covered 8 verses there or so dealing with that. He's going to go through some other things, but that was something that was very important that he brought up first. So what comments do you have? Anyone else?
Well, I think first I would say what you just mentioned about how they're to deal with the people in the land. I think it's interesting the way he words a couple of things here. So when you look at verse 11, he says, "Observe what I command you this day, and behold, who's going to drive out the people of the land? God will," right? So God is going to be the driving force behind it. He's going to drive them out, right? He's the driving force behind this. It's not the power of the people that do this, right? It's not that the Israelites are so mighty or they're so witty or anything like that. They're so crafty that they're able to succeed. It's that God is the one that's going to drive out these people. I think that's important. But, and this is what Lucas was saying, is it up to God to do everything? No. Because what we see after that is you look down at verse 13, and it says, who's going to tear down the altars? You, right? It's not God. God's not the one going to tear down the altars. You're going to tear down the altars. So you see, again, so the idea of a covenant is that you have two parties coming together and agreeing on something, right? And God is saying, I will do this for you. I will use my might to help you obtain the land. And then your part in this is really to just be faithful to me and to get rid of everything else that could cause you from being faithful to me. Now, obviously, when we're talking about God saying, I will drive the people out of the land, is it that the Israelites didn't have any part to play in that either?
Well, when the Israelites, later on, when they do go into the land, the people actually run from them because of what happened in Egypt and what happened crossing the Red Sea. The news had done traveled that God is with this group of people, and when they come, if you don't want to die, you better get out of town. And all of them did, up to the point to the ones that had the old bags of water and all that stuff and made a covenant, which they broke on not making a covenant. But if they'd have followed through and kept running, all the people, and I mean, part of it later on, there was battles. But even though they were so outnumbered, God took out the enemy in the battle that he kept them alive and he let the other ones die.
Yeah. And that's something we see over and over again, is that even though the people, in this case, the children of Israel, have to play a part in this, they are not the power behind this. And so it's not as if God just says, well, just sit there and I'll take care of everything. That's not what's happening here. He wants the people to commit to this. And this is one way it's going to happen. I also want to bring up, so in verse 10, I think there's some kind of interesting things that God says in verse 10. So you look there, he says, behold, I'm making a covenant. So first of all, kind of establishing that idea again, I am making a covenant with you, making it very clear this is what's happening here. So before all your people, I will do marvels, such as have not been created in all the earth or in any nation. All right, well, why is that kind of an interesting statement for God to be telling the Israelites?
Pretty marvelous things in front of them.
Yeah, well, they have some pretty marvelous things in front of them.
I've seen some pretty marvelous
And they've already seen some. So when he's saying, you've got some pretty marvelous things ahead of you, I think that's saying something considering what's already happened. They've already had some pretty marvelous things happen just to get them to where they are. Now, that being said, what effect have those pretty marvelous things had on the people of Israel?
It made them rebellious against God and just didn't people.
Right. So they were, well, it got them out of the land, so it had that effect on them. They were impressed by it, but did that mean that from then on they were just completely obedient? No. And I think that's maybe why when he says, I'm going to do marvelous things for you, he doesn't just stop there and is like, and everything's going to be perfect. That's why he goes into, and here's what you're going to do, right? You're going to have to be obedient. And because they've already not done that, even after the things he's done. So I think that's worth noting too. Also, the idea of not creating bonds with people that are going to take you away from the Lord. I think that's something we can take away from that as well. Not creating lasting attachments with people who are not going to benefit us in serving God. Because, and what you see here in this is that the ultimate goal that God wants for his people is to be his servants, to be, as close to him as they possibly can be. And if something's going to keep you away from that, then you need to get rid of that, right? And now here, he's not saying like, just try to dwell among them and, don't let them influence you. He says, no, drive them out. But I think we can take something from that as well, saying we need to drive out anything that's going to keep us from serving the Lord. He's very serious about that.
Because basically, if you live with evil, you're more apt to be like the evil you're around than if you're separate from the evil.
You get desensitized to it over time, right? You start. Yeah, that you did a good job of that point. That was the only other thing that I was going to add to that. Anybody else have anything before we carry on along those lines? Okay, so for the next little section, he goes back through some of the other parts, not in as much detail as we covered them before, but he just mentions them, reminds them of some of these parts. And I'll read through about 7 verses here pretty quickly, just rehashing some of these other things so we'll be reminded of it. So I'll start in verse 18. It says, the feast of unleavened bread you shall keep. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, as I command you, in the appointed time of the month Abib. For in the month Abib you came out of Egypt. All that open the womb are mine, every male firstborn among your livestock, whether ox or sheep. Firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb. And if you will not redeem him, then you shall break its neck. All the firstborn of your sons you shall redeem, and none shall appear before me empty-handed. So we have the deal, the Passover, the firstborn was required, but the firstborn that was spared, from then on, that's something that they have to do to remember that. Verse 21, 6 days you shall work, but on the 7th day you shall rest. In plowing time and in harvest you shall rest. When you observe the feast of weeks, of the first fruits of wheat harvest, and the feast of ingathering at the year's end, 3 times in the year all your men shall appear before the Lord God of Israel. For I will cast out the nations before you and enlarge your borders. Neither will any man covet your land when you go up to appear before the Lord your God 3 times in the year. So the Lord will look after them while they do that in those times. You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leaven, nor shall the sacrifice of the feast of the Passover be left until morning. So some of the rules of the Passover feast there. The first of the first fruits of your land you shall bring to the house of the Lord your God. And you shall not boil a young goat its mother's milk. Then the Lord said to Moses, write these words according to the tenor of these words. I have made a covenant with you and with Israel. So he was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights, as he was before. He neither ate bread nor drank water. and he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the Ten Commandments. So we have these other reminders mentioned again of all these. Think about all these things. These weren't just technicalities and protocols that he just wanted them to do to be doing it. There was purpose behind all these different things that were listed here. They're reminders. They're reminders of the 10th plague. They're reminders of the Passover feast and what that meant. They're reminders of the Feast of Ingatherings and the Feast of Harvest and how the Lord has blessed them and all those things. And then to do those things, to always remember what the Lord has done with them in this period of time since Egypt up until now. So write them down. He wrote on the tablets the words again. So we have new tablets. We have a new covenant established. So things are better than they were in the last couple of chapters, right?
Hmm.
What comments do we have there? Pause on that.
So I think it's interesting in verse 24 when he talks about, I will cast out nations before you and larger borders, and no one shall covet your land when you go up to appear before the Lord your God 3 times in a year. That's kind of an interesting thing to mention, right? He says you're going to be prosperous, you're going to grow as far as the land you take is your borders are going to enlarge, but no one's going to covet your land. Is that normally how that kind of thing works?
It is when you got God in control of your land.
Right. So not normally, but I guess it's normal with God, right? Normal things with God are not normal with man. And so what you have here is it's an interesting type of protection because you normally think of defenses and you normally think of might as being the things that would deter people. But here he says, people are not going to covet your land. That's just kind of an interesting way to protect the people there. I don't know. I don't think I've ever noticed that before going through it this time, but I thought that was kind of a neat thing.
It's kind of in the comparison you read about Job and Satan told him, you've got a hedge built around him. Nothing can touch Job, and everything he's got prospers. So basically, God's telling them that he's going to put a hedge around the land that they take, and as it grows, nobody ain't going to mess with it because God's actually put a hedge to protect them and their land before it prospers. And that's what I've heard other preachers actually, when they have taught on this before, use Job's hedge built around the things that he had in comparison to Israel. God actually put a hedge around them in this covenant relationship that he's got with them.
Yeah, and who's the only one that can mess that up? Them, right? They're the ones that can mess that up. So, yeah, he's providing a lot, and they just have to respond to that. Do we want to bring up the end of verse 26 and all? Or have we talked about that already? I can't remember.
I've heard it talked about before, but
Okay.
Anybody that wants to elaborate on it. Do you think, before we do that, the not coveting their land, that's during that time that the men are required to go 3 days to appear before the Lord? That's the relation with that? So during a time where they would be vulnerable, while other men are required to do something, that would be a vulnerable time for them. But during that time, don't worry about
the protection.
defenses and protection,
Yeah.
because I'll make sure that during that time,
Yes.
nothing happens. Okay.
So I take that statement to mean that, and I also take it to mean like this will go on as long as you also keep the feast, right? So it will happen during the feast as long as you're keeping the feast. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
And 26, if you have any comments about that, you can throw them out there.
Now, here's all I'm going to say about this. 26 has always very much confused me. I found something I thought was interesting, and here's all I'm not going to make it very short because I read one thing someone wrote about it, and it was like, I think almost literally 15 explanations about what this could be. And one of them was God was trying to get them to cook with olive oil and not butter. I'm like, man, I don't know about that. Like, that seems a little weird to me. But one of the things I thought was interesting is, I may be getting the numbers wrong on this, but I think maybe it appears 3 times. And all 3 times this appears as a commandment. 2 times before, you have this idea of what you have right here. The best of the first fruits of your ground shall go to, you shall bring to the house of the Lord your God. And then the 3rd time, it appears right after that. And so almost every time it seems to be right around that. And so their explanation for this, and again, I don't know, and I think they didn't even know, they were saying, they were kind of speculating a little bit here, was that this may have been some type of idiom to where this meant something to them that maybe it doesn't mean to us today. So the example they gave was if they wrote down, I'm going to ride my hog to Walmart, we may read that and say, okay, he's talking about a motorcycle. Well, in 1,000 years, let's say motorcycles don't exist and they don't know about them. When they read, I rode my hog to Walmart, they're like, he rode a swine to Walmart. That's weird. So his explanation for this was that maybe what this means is the idea of you are not trying to, with the first fruits, mix some of the old in with the new. And so whenever you're giving the first fruits, you're not trying to cheapen it and you're not trying to cut it in any kind of way where you're not fully giving the first fruits. I thought that was an interesting idea. And again, I don't know if that's right or not. So don't take that as just absolutely what it means. But I just thought I'd present that because I thought it was an interesting idea.
Are you referring to about the kid in his mother's milk?
Yeah, I am.
Well, it's also prior to that, it's in chapter 23 and 19, which basically repeats what's there, but it's also in Deuteronomy 14:21. Ye shall not eat of anything that dieth of itself, and thou shalt give it unto a stranger that is in thy gate, that he may eat it, or may sell it to an alien or a foreigner. For thou art a holy people unto the Lord thy God, and thou shalt not see the kid in his mother's milk.
Mm-hmm. And then the verse after that, that's the one I was talking about, was right after. You shall tithe all the yield of your seed that comes from the field year by year. And so they were saying that is paired with the one after it on this one. So the 2 previous ones is paired with what came before, and that one is paired with what came after. So again, I don't know what to make of that, but maybe.
All the scripture, I mean, you can't just take one item. I mean, you can make the Bible say what you want to if you just take the scripture out of context. But if you take it as a whole, all the way down, whether it's here or Deuteronomy, I think he's actually saying that what you're offering to God is holy, and that you're not to discern it by the kid in the mother's milk, meaning that it's been something that's been killed, like it said in Deuteronomy. And what he's wanting is the first fruits, being the harvest. And then if it's the animals, he actually gives the first of the lambs that are unblemished, like they did at the time of the Passover. He don't want stuff that's been killed or blemished, because what you're offering is an offering to God, that you're thanking him for the blessings that he's given unto the people in this covenant, is what I get from it.
All right.
Anybody else have anything? You wanna lead us into 29 there, Moses?
Yep.
In his face.
Moses' face. That's what they should have titled that part. Well, they actually kind of did, the shining face of Moses. So there you go. All right. So 29. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand, and he came down from the mountain, Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone, because he had been talking with God. Aaron and all the people of Israel saw Moses, and behold, the skin of his face shone. And they were afraid to come near him. But Moses called to them, and Aaron and all the leaders of the congregation returned to him, and Moses talked with them. Afterward, all the people of Israel came near, and he commanded them all that the Lord had spoken with him in Mount Sinai. And when Moses had finished speaking with them, he put a veil over his face. Whenever Moses went in before the Lord to speak with him, he would remove the veil until he came out. And when he came out and told the people of Israel what he was commanded, the people of Israel would see the face of Moses, that the skin of Moses' face was shining, and Moses would put the veil over his face again until he went in to speak with him. All right. So we have a very interesting thing happening here. So Moses talks to God. We reestablish the covenant. We get some of the laws. He writes them down, comes down. We've already said it, but what has happened? His face is shining. Yes. His face is shining. So that's not normal, right? It's not a normal thing. The people recognize this, and how do they respond to that?
Right.
They're afraid. Okay. Why?
Pretty
Bright.
Pretty bright. Pretty bright.
It's not normal.
Yeah, it's not normal. At the very least, it's not normal. I mean, I don't know what they're thinking. It's like, is this the ghost of Moses? It's like, I don't know. But it's not normal at the very least. And they don't come to him until when? Yeah, he says, come over here. And then they do, right? So he has to call for them. They're not going to approach otherwise. So he calls for them, and what does he do? Yeah, he tells them everything God has said, everything we've gone through. And then he develops a habit after this. And what's the habit? Yes. So he wears a veil. When does he wear the veil?
Talks to God when he doesn't talk.
Right.
Doesn't talk.
So, and maybe, right, yeah. So correct me on this if I read it wrong. But I think what it's saying is he goes in, talks to God, no veil. He comes out, talks to the people, no veil. And then when he gets done talking to people, he wears the
I'm a
veil.
little confused by that too, but I think that's the way I
Yeah, and I think the reason, if I've got that right, I think the reason for that is as evidence for the people. This is something I think that would pretty clearly show he's just talked to God. And again, the first evidence of it is he was up on the mountain. He had talked to God when he came down. So also, these repeated instances where he's talking to God, where do y'all think that's taking place?
Image, tabernacle.
So the tent of meeting. So I think that's probably where it's happening. I could be wrong about that, but mine says when he goes in to meet the Lord, not when he goes up. And again, maybe that doesn't mean a whole lot, but that's what I've read in that. So
Tabernacle of the congregation.
yeah,
Or his tent or whatever when he goes in and talks to the Lord.
right. We talked about in chapter 33. Yeah, I think that's what it is also. But what do you have to say about that?
But basically, the reason that he glows is because of the glory that he was around God, actually absorbed in Moses to the point that it was basically a miracle that when the people seen him, they had no doubt that the only way you could get to look something like it, he's been with God. We've seen the pillar. We've seen when he come off the mountain, when he had the tablets, he had this glow to him. So I think they're relating that, he's not doing this to be a show. He's actually absorbed this because he was talking with God.
Yeah, it's certainly evidence that he's talked to God.
I
Right?
think that's
That's right.
a visual reminder to them.
Mhm.
This is a reminder that this is not about Moses, right? And
Mhm.
Moses doesn't seem he understands it's not about him. But what if they disagreed with Moses or something? Well, this is a reminder that this is Moses just bringing us what God has told him. Literally, God just told him that because he's still glowing from his
Mhm.
and being in God's presence. So I do think that it's just another way that the Lord is just helping build their
The
faith
people
and
done
remind them.
told Moses, we do not want him to talk to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that hasn't changed.
Is this the first time it mentions the glow of the space? I don't remember it before.
I don't think so. I don't.
He came down the mountain the first time.
I think it's the first time.
Right. So yes, I've thought about that, and I wonder if it's because this would be the time after he's asked to see the glory of God, and I assume when he was up on the mountain, that was kind of like the time where that happened. And so maybe every time after this, he's doing something similar to that, and it's different than it was before. I don't know, but that's my speculation.
It might be a visual that here the people can see, when Moses would speak to them, these are the words of God.
Right.
And they have that visual to them, so that they remember to
Mhm.
respect him, everything that he says.
Right.
This is the word of God. This is not the word from a man.
Yeah.
And they have that visual that reminds them,
Mm-hmm.
keep this. This is important.
Yeah. And I should say what I was saying just now about him seeing the glory of God. I'm not saying that's absolutely what it was. I'm just saying that that's the only thing I could tell that was different in his previous meetings in this one, is that was specifically mentioned here. But it may just be like you're saying, God saying, "Hey, this is a reminder. I just talked to him, and you should listen." Yeah.
Anything else? All right. Well, I think if we can cover chapter 35, that would be great tonight, and leave us at a good launching point for talking about some of the specifics of the tabernacle in our next lesson. So we'll go ahead and begin. 35 starts off with 3 verses on the Sabbath day, and I'm not sure why it's here. It seems a little out of place for what we have. It seems like it might have went better over with some of those other things, but they're reminded about the Sabbath day. No work shall be done. Work shall be done for 6 days. On the 7th day, it's a holy day. It's rest. If you break it, you get put to death. And you shall kindle no fire throughout your dwellings on the Sabbath day. So we're reminded about that and what that means, that they do have a day of rest now where they didn't have rest when they were in Egypt. But going on into, I'll start with verse 4 here and go for a little bit, about halfway maybe. Moses spoke to the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, "This is the thing which the Lord has commanded." So Moses says, all right, we're back in the covenant with the Lord, and we have something special that we're going to do here, and I need your help. He says in verse 5, "Take from among you an offering to the Lord." So we're going to need stuff, and this is not just you giving stuff, but in doing this, you're making an offering to the Lord. "Whoever is of a willing heart," remember that, we're going to see that phrase throughout this chapter a few different times, "let him bring it as an offering to the Lord: gold, silver, bronze, blue, purple, scarlet thread, fine linen, goat's hair, ram skins, dyed red, badger skins, and acacia wood." We're going to need oil for the light, spices for the anointing oil, and for the sweet incense, onyx stones, and stones to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate. So Moses comes to the people and says, we need stuff. We need this, and he gives them a list. This is the stuff we need. And we need you to make an offering to the Lord in bringing and donating stuff like this. Now, where they obviously have all this stuff. Where did they get all this stuff? They've been toting it around since they left Egypt, right? So it's still very odd that these slave people are carrying around these massive amounts of wealth like this. But that's one of the ways that the Lord blessed them in leaving, is they left with great wealth. But Moses approaches them and says, we need this stuff. And he hasn't specifically said what they're going to do with it yet. But anyone who is of a willing heart, we need donations here. We need offerings. And it mentions a wide list of things, and we'll see how they're all used here in the near future. But gold, silver, and bronze, obviously, and then other precious things, precious cloths, colors that would have been precious: blue, purple, scarlet, and then skins, different kinds of skins, and wood. Acacia wood is mentioned. Stones, precious stones that were going to be used. He mentions for the breastplate. And they may not know what breastplate or what. They may not be sure about that. But anyway, he gives them a list of things that they need. So does anybody have anything to say any more on that before we go on into verse 10?
I think the only thing I'd say about that is I think even though they've not had this wealth and they were given this wealth, at this point, I imagine they are like, this is ours. And when it says a willing heart, mine says generous heart, I think that's what it would have taken in order to be like, okay, this is not mine anymore. And I think it's important too for them to understand this is not mine. I think that's something God was looking for the people to understand. This is not ours. This is really the Lord's. And it's important for them to make that connection, I think.
It's a test of faith, but I mean, like you said, these are people that come from having nothing ever.
Mm-hmm.
And now they finally got something, and it'd be easy to say, mine,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Well, I mean, give it up now, this is mine.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think it's a test of faith. Where you at?
The way they lay it out, I think it emphasizes the attitude in doing it. He could have made a law.
Mhm.
All right, everybody, pony up. Everybody owes this much. You know, bring it. We'll check you off the list. He could have went about it that way, right?
And he does with like tithes, first fruits, and things like that, but not with this.
But this is something that is meant. You know, bring it willingly. Bring what you can. Bring what you got for this important thing that we're doing.
Well, I think that the children of Israel, when he asked for this, and then they had seen the people that got slaughtered after making the idol, and the idol being burned up and those being made to drink it. I think when he asked to do it, I don't think it'd be much in your heart to say that, you know, I'm gonna keep this. I don't wanna make him mad. I mean, we've done seen God mad, and we just lucky to have a covenant with him. We need to give whatever we can, all we can, because he's gonna provide for us, because look, he's been feeding them and provides water and protection all the way up to this time. So,
Yeah, I think that would, well, hopefully it would help with the attitude. Yeah.
All right, so let's continue on in verse 10. And I may go through a pretty good chunk here about this.
Okay.
He says, all who are gifted artisans among you shall come and make all that the Lord has commanded. So I need people who are skilled at making some stuff here. Gifted artisans. And he goes through with a list. He says the tabernacle. We're going to make a tabernacle. We're going to make a tent. And he mentions things that they'll be doing. We're going to make a tent. It's coverings, clasps, boards, bars, pillars, sockets. The ark, it mentions poles that are going to go with it. It's going to be a mercy seat. The veil, the covering, table and its poles, utensils, showbread, lampstand for light, its utensils, lamps, oil for the light, incense altar and poles, anointing oil, sweet incense, the screen for the door at the entrance, altar of burnt offering, bronze grating, poles, utensils, laver, base, hangings of the court, pillars, sockets, screen for the court, pegs for the tabernacle, pegs for the court, cords, and then there's going to be garments that are going to be needed. So he's kind of giving them all right, here's just a brief overview of what we're doing. But anyway, garments for those that are going to be ministering at this tabernacle in the holy place, the holy garments for Aaron and the priest and the garments of his sons to minister as priests. So he's laid out, we need stuff. This is what we're going to be doing with it. There are going to be a lot more details later. We're fixed to see all the specific details. But he lays it out to them. This is what we're going to make. We're going to make this list of things. We need people that can help with this. We need stuff to help this. So in verse 20, it says, all the congregation departed from the presence of Moses. Then everyone came whose heart was stirred. We have it worded a little different there. And everyone whose spirit was willing. And they brought the Lord's offering for the work of the tabernacle of meeting, for all its service, for the holy garments. They came, both men and women, as many as had a willing heart, there it is again, and brought earrings, nose rings, necklaces, jewelry of gold. That is, every man who made an offering of gold to the Lord. And every man with whom was found blue, purple, and scarlet thread, fine linen, goat's hair, red skins of rams, badger skins, brought them. Everyone who offered an offering of silver or bronze brought the Lord's offering, and everyone with whom was found acacia wood for any work of the service brought it. All the women who were gifted artisans spun yarn with their hands and brought what they had spun of blue, purple, and scarlet and fine linen. And all the women whose hearts stirred with wisdom spun yarn of goat's hair. The rulers brought onyx stones, and the stones to be set in the ephod and the breastplate, and the spices and the oil for the light, for the anointing oil, for the sweet incense. And the children of Israel brought a free will offering, it describes it here, to the Lord, all the men and women whose hearts were willing to bring material for all kinds of work, which the Lord by the hand of Moses had commanded to be done. So we see cooperation. We see people hearing what needed to be done and attempting to do it. They bring the stuff. They start working on the gathering part of it, right? Bringing the different categories of things that are needed. And a lot of the women there it mentioned started working on getting spinning the yarn and the different things there that are needed for this. I'll say a thing or two more, and then I'll let Austin finish up maybe wherever we'll end. It mentioned quite a few times, and we already covered this pretty well, but those who were willing, those whose hearts were stirred, participated. And we have we're going to see a lot that did participate. You think there were some that hearts were not stirred and hearts were not willing in this that didn't? I mean,
I'm sure there probably were.
Probably were.
Yeah.
So you've been toting this box of spices around for however long now, and now this is the most valuable thing I own, and now they need it. So you decide to go and we're going to go and give ours to the work of the tabernacle here to make this tabernacle. Moses needs it, and your neighbor decides so he's not gonna participate. He didn't do that, right? How would that make you feel? I'm not pointing to you. How would it make you feel if you really are willing and your heart's stirred and you go and you give and you see somebody that you know is not? They're not all in like you are. How would it make you feel?
Could make you resentful.
Good. Discouraged. All right. Resentful to them.
Mm-hmm.
Is that just something that we sometimes have to deal with in life? Maybe not just in giving what we give, but in a broader sense, when we look around and maybe you're trying hard and maybe you see somebody that you think could try harder. It's not, it kind of is, I think. And I thought of that, because it mentioned all the ones that were willing did it. So maybe there were some that didn't, and maybe that was an issue. I'm not sure.
You can't let others keep you from doing what you
Yeah. There were obviously
Yeah.
a lot that did what you said, didn't let others keep them from doing what they were asked to do.
But the thing about it was, it wasn't like it was being sent off to another country. It's a place of worship that's going to be everywhere they go, as long as they keep the commandments of God and the covenant. All this wealth that they're given to build this tabernacle and the whole structure that's there, it's still theirs. It's just going to be in a house of worship, basically, is what the tabernacle is.
That's an interesting thought. So when's the last time, I just thought of this when you said this, Steve. When's the last time we see the children really mourning? When God said his presence would not be with them. Well, God said he's going to go with them now. And it seems like there's almost this outpouring of thankfulness, of a willing attitude of saying, hey, God's presence is going to be with us, and guess where it's going to be? And what we're donating to, right? And that's an interesting thought. You were talking about, it's not like they're donating to some other country or anything like that. It's for God to be with us. And I like that idea.
Anything else?
Getting back to what you were saying about, whether your neighbor gave or not, I think about like that. Who here was it convenient to get out on a cold night? None of us, it's convenient to do that. But, how many of us have neighbors or whatever that, choose to stay home? But we're here. And I see every one of you, and I rejoice at that. You encourage me, you build me up by being. So I think that's what you have to do, is you have to focus on the positive.
Yeah.
It does wonders for your attitude.
Yeah. Yeah. Focus on what you're trying to accomplish, not what other people decide they're not going to do.
People that are supporting you in that too, focus on
Mm-hmm.
You know, to build one another up.
Sure, it's
Yeah.
nice when you got others around you that you can look at and lean on. Right?
Mm-hmm. Good point.
All right. Well, I guess we're stopping at verse 29. Pick up in verse 30. We almost got there.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.